Good morning, fellow Plexers. This video goes out to Bruce in the Plexaholics Facebook group under a thread by Nathan. It's all about moving Plex server from a Synology NAS to a Windows PC for a better iGPU. And I just learned that Bruce has 84 terabytes of Plex media. So I'm going to suggest something better for him than Windows, and it's what I use, Unraid, as a Docker host only on a 14th gen i5 inside an Asus NUC. So let's just start with Synology DSM because Bruce has a DS 1621 Plus. It's a 6-bay versus my 5-bay NAS. And I can't remember if he has one expansion unit like I have. So let me go into Storage Manager. All right, so I've recently reset this NAS up because I have the expansion unit. I was running 6 16 terabyte Iron Wolf drives in an SHR array, which is like RAID 5 but more flexible. It's a Synology optional RAID array. And I had one of the 16 terabyte drives in the expansion unit. The first 5 were in the main unit. Well, I backed all my media up and I destroyed my volume.
From Google Voice.
And I bought 2 more 16 terabyte Iron Wolf Pro drives, and I purchased 2 1 terabyte Western Digital Red SATA SSDs. So I now have a fast SSD volume in RAID 1. I'll never expand that to additional drives, so RAID 1 is better than SHR. And this way I have redundancy on this volume, and this is where Synology packages and Docker containers can run in a very fast way. And about the only thing I can demonstrate it for other Synology NAS owners who have a trash guide set up. Look how fast Sonar opens up. I would wait 30 to 40 seconds for that to open up when it ran on the Rusty array. So my volume 2 has 87.3 terabytes of total storage, and all my Plex media and a few other things take up 53.3 terabytes. So Bruce at 84 terabytes is not only in my league, he's surpassed my storage amount. I thought I had a lot. So his Plex server does not deserve to be run under Windows. It just doesn't, especially if he's using a mini computer that's powered by an N100 processor. He's looking for Plex hardware accelerated transcoding, and the AMD processor in his DS1621 Plus doesn't have an iGPU. So we're similar on the Synology side. I do have an iGPU. It's a 9th gen Celeron. It's not bad, but I have phenomenal processing ability for hardware accelerated transcoding in my 14th gen Asus NUC. So here's the model number of the NUC. Here's the processor. It's an Ultra 5 125H. And here's the iGPU, a Meteor Lake-P Intel ARC graphics. It's phenomenal. So why I suggest Unraid. First of all, it's very easy to install. And people say you can't use Unraid because it now costs too much money. Well, a license for just up to 5 drives is like $49 a year. And this gives you the most Synology DSM experience if it's a standalone mini PC like I'm using or like Bruce is using. So it's very easy to maintain, and it's actually very easy to set up also. So the easiest part is you create a user for Unraid on your Synology NAS and give that user permissions to your Plex Media shared folder. And really, for an optimum setup that you might use a trash guides install alongside, you want just one shared media folder. But this doesn't break anything if you have multiple ones. So it's a nice interface. And let's click to the main tab. I was losing focus for a second. So this is the primary benefit. I have in this system two 500 gigabyte Western Digital Red drives. One is a SATA SSD and one is an M.2 NVMe. You can join the dissimilar technologies into what Unraid calls a cache pool. A single SSD would be a cache drive. Two or more is a cache pool. And we might get distracted by the word cache. It's simply a volume. Unraid calls an SSD volume a cache drive or a cache pool. If you're coming from the DSM Synology NAS world, you think of cache as a standalone process of speeding up access to files, and you can pop one or two NVMe drives into the bottom of most Synology NAS models to gain the cache. Plex server does not need that type of a cache. So when I say cache pool, it's really just a volume. So this is where the Docker container lives. And if I click this little icon, Plex is very similar. Lots of times it lives in an app data folder like it does under Windows. Well, these are the container folders on this little Unraid install. And here's Plex. And if you drill down far enough, you get the standard Plex Media Server application folder. I moved my Plex server from my Synology NAS to this setup, just like I've shown moving it to Windows or moving from Windows to Synology or from any other system. Plex is very portable. When I first got into all of this with Docker containers, people told me that the biggest benefit of a Docker container is its portability. That's true, but Plex was portable before, whether or not it ran in a Docker container. Okay, so going back to the main thing, it's very easy to set up these permanent mounts. It's all through the Unraid GUI. So this mount goes back to my one single shared media folder for Plex Media. This mount goes back to a separate shared media folder for my channel's DVR recordings, which I also run here. So if I go to Docker, you can see I have these containers, and Plex is the last one. And oftentimes it says there's an update available that isn't an official update. It's not a new version change. Let me see if I have anybody on my server. I don't have anyone on my server. So to check for updates, it's even easier than running containers on a Synology NAS. You click check for updates. 20, 30 seconds later. All right, so this Minecraft server needs an update, and so does Plex. I'll hit apply update, answer yes, I'm sure, update it. And within about 60 to 90 seconds, the container's updated. All done. I'll do the same for the little Minecraft server I'm testing out with my adult sons. Now I like to update containers manually. I've never installed Watchtower in a Docker container, but I imagine Watchtower will work here as well as it would under a Synology NAS or an Ubuntu install. So there's always that option also. I'd rather read the release and then update manually, and it's very easy to do that. So you see the Plex container updated faster than the Minecraft server container did. But this is almost done. Okay, all done. So I've got DispatchR installed. I haven't checked it out yet. It's on my long list. And it's not really doing much, so it should update pretty quickly. Done. So that's how you update under Unraid. So what else would I like to show you that is a benefit? my CyberPower UPS that's connected to this Synology NAS with a USB cable. If I go to Control Panel under DSM, Hardware and Power, and click on UPS, you see I've checked Enable UPS Support and the UPS type. What I've also done is enable Permitted Synology NAS devices. This is the local IP address of my little NUC running Unraid. So this shuts down within 2 minutes. Okay, so if I go back to Unraid, and this just won't go back to the window. If I go back to Unraid and go into Applications, and you get notice of these little different updates, you can just click on them. So if I go to Installed Applications, I had to manually install NUT and configure it, but it's not hard to install. So if I click into it and then go into Actions and Settings, you can see I listed the IP address of my Synology NAS. This mono user and password was already filled in. I think it's pretty default. And I have this set to shut down after 2 minutes also of power loss. And then the BIOS of the little NUC is configured to turn back on after a power loss event if it was already on. It all works like clockwork. But that requires something else to be fixed. So even if you got that same configuration under Windows, a modern NUC is going to boot up so much faster than a Synology NAS. So I want to delay both these mounts and the Docker containers from starting so that my Synology NAS is up serving files before anything under Unraid that needs to happen happens. So the NUC will boot faster into Unraid. And if I say it's stupidly easy, please trust me, it's just stupidly easy. Everything is stupidly easy. So I have these unassigned devices down here. So if I go over and click on the little gear for unassigned devices settings, I've delayed my remote mounts by 240 seconds. And that's all I had to do to make sure that everything was going well in the Synology NAS before I made the connections. And I played around with this. 180 seconds wasn't long enough. I think 210 or something was what I needed, and I added another 30 seconds just for good measure. Well, I also wanted to delay my containers from starting. And you can reorder containers. If this is unlocked, I can now drag my containers around to start one before the other. Well, I needed a sacrificial container that didn't really do anything. It didn't depend on a mount to a file on, or a folder or file on this setup or my Synology NAS. So this internal speed test fit the bill. So I can delay the next container from starting by 300 seconds. So when you put a delay here, it doesn't delay this container, it delays the next one. Then you see I delay 5 seconds, 30 seconds. It takes about 7.5 or 8 minutes when the NUC reboots for my Plex server to spin up, and by then I'm well assured that all the mounts are good. As for moving the container, I already showed you the folder structure. You just, like any other system, you create the new Plex server, but you don't claim it. You don't even start it if you don't have to, but if you start it, you just shut it down because it's unclaimed. And you go in and you replace the application folders from the previous thing, and then you edit the settings. Let's see, where are we? Edit. Let's click Advanced View, and let's go down to the bottom and click Show More Settings. Very easy to set up. This is the repository I'm pulling from, which was added automatically because I had a choice of different Plex servers to install from different maintainers of the Docker container. I added some extra parameters. And let me show you that in case somebody copies this instead of watching my my playlist on this subject. Let's see. So let's break this down into individual lines. There's just a space separating all of them. So this gives the container access to the iGPU in this NUC. This creates RAM storage, or transcoding to RAM, not RAM storage, transcoding to RAM. And I'm using 16 gigabytes out of my 64 gigabytes of RAM on this system. It's perfect for my use. And then I think all you have to do in Plex's settings is add this /TMP, and we'll check that out now to make sure my memory is accurate. So there's my regular server. All right, so this is all my test servers that I have running, and this is my main server. So if I go to the transcoder settings, yeah, just /TMP is all I had to do, and now all transcoding happens in RAM off this super fast iGPU. It's a beautiful setup. So very easy to configure. I don't need that again. Let's close that down. So my mounts work from the unassigned devices. And if I click into that, you actually see the folder structure. I can actually drill down through this to my Synology NAS, but I'm sharing, or let's say I'm not sharing, but I'm mounting my Synology NAS's shared media folder, not subfolders inside of it. And then the only change when you create the container is this says something else. I forget what it says. You change that to cache to make sure it installs on your cache pool. You have to do that with every container. There's probably a setting someplace to set globally to make that happen, but I wasn't concerned with finding that. I just make the adjustment when I create a container. The PYD and PGID numbers are already determined for you. Unlike on a Synology NAS and a Docker container, you have to discover them with a SSH into using terminal with a code ID. It's just all very easy. And if we go in and edit this mount, you can have it read write or you can have it read only. Now, with a Windows setup, I think I'd want it read only, because if your Windows machine got infected, you don't want that to serve as a gateway to your Synology NAS for a ransomware attack. I'm not worried with one Linux machine having read-write access. Read-write access allows me to spin up a DVR. My channel's DVR container needs read-write access. Actually, for how I use Plex, without a DVR, I could change this to read only and it wouldn't affect anything. So everything's just very easy. And of course, I have a playlist on doing all this. Everything I discovered moving my container to Unraid, I made a little video of it. If I had to do a correction video, I did. My first video, I set up the mount wrong, so I had to do a little correction video to show how to do it correctly. But so this is really a nice system. Oh, there's one more thing to show you. If you're watching this, it's probably because you have a Synology NAS and you want to move Plex to a fabulous little NUC to have great hardware accelerated transcoding ability. So the best thing is the App Data Backup app that you can install. Let's go into Actions and Settings. So this is configured to send the backup that this creates back through that shared mount right into my shared media folder on the Synology NAS. And before I explain further, let's go there. Let's go to File Station. My shared media folder. And I just made another subfolder called Unraid Container Backup. And these are the backups from Unraid. So what happens under Unraid is this tool will shut down my Docker containers, on Wednesday morning at 3 a.m., back all of them up, and also back up the boot information off the USB flash drive that you boot Unraid off from. And then it spins the containers back up. So you get all your containers backed up, you get your if I can think of the word, your boot files backed up, and it's all just super clean. And you can specify which containers you want to be skipped. So I don't skip any, I have everything backed up. And in my case, I have an older Synology DS1019 Plus NAS, also with an expansion unit, and I have a mixed SHR2 array made up of 5 12 terabyte Iron Wolf drives and 5 8 terabyte Iron Wolf drives. I have about 13 terabytes free at the moment. Twice a week, Synology Hyper Backup backs everything from this NAS up to the older Synology NAS, which means my Unraid configuration is in an easy restorable area on the DS1520 Plus. But if this NAS bursts into flames, I can still restore everything to a new Synology NAS from the DS1520, which means I also have access to those Unraid backup utilities. And I think the last thing I want to show you that I don't have set up on this unit, but I do on my test server, is I ordered a good Samsung Fit little flash drive to have something be reliable for the long term. On my bench system running Unraid that I can screw around with to help people out without worrying about my production system, I went another direction. I bought a little USB reader for a micro SD card, and then I put a 32 gigabyte high density, high endurance micro SD card into that. Unraid writes its license to the USB boot drive. Well, or let's say it doesn't write its license. It takes the ID of the USB boot drive, the USB flash drive, and incorporates that into the license. And there's a little rigmarole to go through if you need to replace your USB boot drive for Unraid. Well, in this instance, it's taken the ID of the SD card reader that's just a little USB tiny adapter, and now you can make easier backups of the boot files onto another micro SD card and just swap it over without going through Unraid's more involved process to change USB boot drives. So I have another one I bought for my newer Unraid, or my regular Unraid setup. I just haven't switched over to it, and I probably won't unless the USB drive dies. So when I have to do that process, it'll be just like this one. So Bruce, there's a lot of compelling reasons not to use Windows if your new N100 based mini computer is just going to be headless. Everything's web based, just like Synology NAS. Update Unraid when you want to. You don't have to. This is pretty stable. And the only thing I did have to wait for, let's see, I upgraded from an 11th gen Intel branded NUC with an i5 in it, this unit actually. In 2023, I moved my Plex server off the Synology NAS to the other Unraid install with this hardware. And in January of this year, I bought the better Asus NUC, and the Linux kernel for Unraid wasn't new enough to see the iGPU. I was disappointed when Unraid 6 went to Unraid 7 because the kernel still wasn't new enough. But when it went to Unraid 7.1, it was new enough to see the iGPU, and I got my hardware acceleration back for transcoding. Truth be told, I have gig fiber service from Verizon Fios, and nobody transcodes off my server unless their device is incompatible with the audio stream. And that's only with Roku devices and I've kind of weaned my users off Roku devices. I have a few friends that still use them, but I basically everybody's using a Google TV or an Android TV device besides my son and somebody else using an Apple TV, and none of those devices transcode the audio. Um, AEC3 or AC3, whatever it is, that often transcodes on a Roku. Unless the Roku is connected to a sound bar or a home theater system. So, Bruce, that's my little pitch. You'll be much better served. And I have a playlist showing you how to do all of this. Different videos. Every time I learn something new, I showed everybody else how to do it too. And so far, I've had 6 or 7 people successfully copy this who are very happy with Unraid versus running a desktop OS. It's not so much I'm telling you not to use Windows. I would not use Linux. I'm a Linux guy. I gave up Windows in 2006. I would not do any of this with a desktop OS, even if it was Linux. Unraid is perfect. $49 a month, the ease of use, having it be Synology DSM-like. It's just all too easy and well worth the price. So, that's my hard pitch. And the best thing is, you can try Windows. It doesn't cost you anything to try Windows. Move your server over, but leave, copy the information over. Leave this just not running. If you get tired, you can try Unraid. All it's going to cost you is a good flash drive or that SD card reader and a high endurance micro SD card and a couple of SSDs. You'll probably want to get 1 or 2 terabyte if you're doing the thumbnails, but you put them in a RAID configuration. If your mini PC only has room for a laptop SATA drive and a M.2 drive, you can still create a RAID out of the dissimilar drive technologies. And it's all just easy peasy. It's stupidly easy. So that's my pitch. I think it's a good one, and happy plexing.